Welcome everybody to the Fanmouth Daily Fantasy Baseball Breakdown for Sunday, June the 29th. I'm Joe Marsh, joined today by Dave Del Grande. How you doing, Dave?
We don't do this often on a Sunday. I'm looking forward to a big slate of games. I like those big slates.
Yeah, typically we only cover the night games, but it's Sunday. All the games are taking place in the day, so we're going to go through all of the games, including the night game. We're going to build our lineups. We're going to give you advice based on who we like. And starting with pitcher, now for me, I think you absolutely have to look at Kershaw. He's been dominant in June. He's got a .97 ERA, 11.67 strikeouts per nine, only 2 walks over 37 innings. He's facing the Cardinals, who don't hit lefties that well. They're 24th in hitting against lefties. They're 27th in runs scored in the month of June. So this looks like a really good matchup. Obviously, I think you have to make a choice here between Kershaw and Hernandez because I don't think you can afford both. I think you do want to have one of them going for you tonight. And for me, the choice is Kershaw. Now, to pair with him, I think you need to look farther down the list. You know, you really don't want to be spending, I believe he's 21,000 on one guy. You can't really afford to have another top tier starter. So I would go all the way down to Mike Bolsinger. I know that's not a big name here, but he's actually has pitched well in the month of June. He's got a 2.57 ERA. He's faced some tough teams. And again, we're going against San Diego. They're still only hitting 176 in the month of June. They've scored 56 runs, which is 18 less than the next worst team. They've just been shut down by McCarthy and Colementor. So, I don't really fear going against him, even with a mediocre pitcher. I like his price, and I really like the matchup against San Diego. Dave, what are you thinking at pitcher today?
Yeah, I like both your choices. The only problem I have with Bolsinger is I like young pitchers pitching at home. I mean, when you face San Diego, either site is, you can have a great game against them. So it really shouldn't make that big a deal. I would jump all over him if he were at home. On the road, I'm a little skeptical. Of course, you know me. I look at the bottom of the pitching charts to see what the best values are. I don't see a whole lot down there today. Gibson of the Twins has pitched very well, surprisingly well. I think he's the best of the low-priced pitchers, but even he's on the road at Texas. Texas isn't the hitting machine they used to be, but at home, that's not an ideal matchup either. And so I'm with you. You got to have Kershaw in the lineup. And my second choice is going to be Gallardo of the Brewers. He's got arguably the best matchup of strikeout pitcher against a team that strikes out a lot. And he's been pitching very well lately. I've talked several times this week about going against the Rockies on the road. The Brewers just keep beating them. The games, the Brewers haven't been scoring a lot of runs, but they've actually been pitching pretty well in these games. And this guy is a hot pitcher for them. The Rockies pitcher, De La Rosa, is not a hot pitcher at all. It's a game I think that Milwaukee should win. And Gallardo is, he's a very middleweight type price and a real nice bargain, I think. So I think you can pair him with Kershaw. You're going to have to save some money at 2 or 3 positions on offense, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
All right, I like that. Yeah, the one thing about Bolsinger, I mean, he is on the road, but it's at San Diego, which is actually a much better pitcher's park than Arizona is. So I feel a bit safe with that choice,
Yeah,
especially the way, I mean, like a Brandon McCarthy went in there and pitched well. I mean, if he can do it, I think anybody can do it.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a solid choice.
I was looking at Whitley a little bit. I think he's been decent. If you're willing to overlook his, bad start at Toronto, down in the low end department, I think he should be decent at home against Boston. That would be if you really want to go. I don't think you need to save that much tonight because we'll get into some other spots to save. What about back behind the plate? What do you like?
Well, here's a spot where I think you can save money. First off, I think what we have to do offensively, is find a place to play some Brewers. All week long, we've talked about having 6 or 7 different possibilities among the Brewer hitters. Most of them are high priced. Certainly, Lucroy is a nice matchup here against De La Rosa, but he's the highest priced catcher, and I do not want to go there. I'll find another Brewer or 2 elsewhere. I like Navarro of Toronto. Toronto is at home. They've been slumping a bit. They've got some injuries. They're not hitting the ball on this homestand like they have in the past, but they do hit lefties well. Quintana is a decent lefty, an average lefty. I expect Toronto to put up some runs in this game. And Navarro, I played him once earlier this week. He had a homer for me, so I like him, and he's at a very modest price. So I think you get some pop there for at a good bargain.
Yeah, good stuff there. Another matchup I really want to go after is the Twins against Colby Lewis. He's been absolutely terrible. 7.12 ERA at home this year. He's given up a 3.45 batting average. He's been bad against righties. He's been terrible against lefties. I think you can go with a Kurt Suzuki here, who actually hits well against righties. He's one of their righties that hits righties pretty well, 295 against righties, having a solid June, hitting 312. Not a lot of pop, but a very cheap guy. Like you said, there's a few spots. There's a few heavyweight hitters I want. There's some heavyweight pitchers I want. So this is one of the spots that I'm going to need to save a bit of money.
I agree with you, by the way, about going after Lewis. He's arguably the worst pitcher going today. And Minnesota's not a great offensive team, but they've been decent lately, and this game is at Texas, a nice hitter's park. So, yeah. If you can find a couple of Minnesota guys, and I think I will find one at our very next position.
Yeah, you want to tell me about what you like at first base?
Well, at first base, there are two real standouts, I think, and they're the two highest priced guys. I mean, Encarnacion at home against a left-handed pitcher, I think is a great play, but he's a huge price. Abreu in that same game, again against a lefty. And he's the second highest price. You got the two highest priced first basemen are both very much warranted. I'm not sure if you're going to pitch Kershaw that you can play either one of them, but if you can, I think you should. And maybe that saves my bargain first baseman as your utility guy, and that's Mauer. Mauer's been on a nice little roll lately. And he's going to eat up Lewis. So Lewis, like I said, I think is arguably the worst pitcher going tonight. And I think Mauer at a very low price is a very nice play at first base.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. I do like Mauer a bit. You really they don't have a lot of left-handed hitters. But Lewis has been terrible, giving up a 383 batting average to lefties. So I think Mauer's a place you can go. And I was surprised a bit when you said there were only two standout hitters at first base today, because I see a ton of them. I like the two you mentioned. I like Teixeira. I like Freeman. But my top choice actually is Miguel Cabrera. He's hitting 348 with 11 home runs against righties. Playing in Houston, which is a great hitter's park, facing Feldman, who's given up 7 home runs to righties and only in 7 starts. I think he's got a really good shot at a home run today. So, but like I said, I don't see a lot of depth in the outfield like I usually do. We'll get into that. So I think your utility for sure is coming out of first base. Whether it's one of the two guys you mentioned who I like, also Cabrera, Teixeira are good, Mauer's good if you need to save some money. I see a lot to like at first base today.
Agreed. I think that this is a position where you want two guys going, again, if you can afford it.
Yeah. Second base, nothing new here for me. Altuve and Weeks are the plays I think to make. Altuve had another multi-hit game yesterday. That's 8 multi-hit games. He's got 8 hits his last 3 games. He's hitting 414 in June. And then from the lower end, Ricky Weeks has been hitting very well lately, 7 for his last 23. He's hitting 413 at home. Again, he's typically in the lineup when they're facing a left-hander. So I think Altuve is a great play. However, with a very solid cheaper play, I think this will be a spot to save money. So I probably will end up with Weeks, but if your lineup ends up with the money, I think Altuve is a good play. What do you got at second base?
Well, I agree with you. I think this is a position to save money. I actually think there are 3 really nice bargains here that I actually prefer over the higher price guys. You mentioned Weeks. I think he's a good way to get a Brewer in your lineup. Callaspo of the A's. The A's are facing a lefty, Heaney. The A's are finding a way to beat Miami and score some runs against them. I think Callaspo should get his value in this game. And then Forsythe of Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has not been a great hitting team, but he's really hit the ball well this past week. And they're up against Gonzalez of Baltimore, not a good pitcher, one of the weaker pitcher going tonight. And so I think all three of those guys, depending on how much money you want to save, you can go in any of those three directions and get some production without spending a whole lot.
Yeah, Heaney's interesting. He was pretty highly touted coming up. He made a decent start and then a very poor start. Certainly not going to start him against the A's, but I don't mind going against him a little bit. So I think that's a solid play. Third base, kind of an easy call. Again, this is one of the spots I think you have to spend money. And use Aramis Ramirez. He's just continued to be hot, hitting 357 in June. And, you have to love him against lefties. 6 home runs in 48 at-bats. You're looking at 1 home run every 8 at-bats. That's a pretty eye-popping number. I think he's an absolute must-play. As far as, like I said, the more expensive guys that I think you have to plug in Aramis Ramirez first and then build your lineup from there offensively. What do you think?
A very good point. I agree with this. I think that there's one high-priced outfielder I like, and there's a couple of high-priced first basemen that I like, but Ramirez has to be in your lineup. I've talked already a couple of times about having exposure to the Brewers. He is number one on that list, ahead of their 3 outfielders, ahead of Lucroy, ahead of all the guys we've mentioned so far. And so this brings me back to why I'm probably going to end up with Mauer at first base instead of Encarnacion or Abreu, just because I'm spending big at third base, I'm spending big on Kershaw, I'm spending big on at least one of the outfielders, and so I doubt I'm going to be able to afford a big heavyweight first baseman.
Yeah, I've been pretty much on him all week. Again, like I said, you may have to bump someone else for him. I wouldn't bump him out of the third base spot for anybody. Shortstop, what do you think?
I'm waiting to hear what you have to say at shortstop, because I'm looking to save money at the position, and I don't see it. I don't see the guy. Nobody's jumping out at me there. I think Reyes is the top play among the shortstops, but he's the third highest priced guy, and I'm not sure I want to spend that kind of money. I'm all ears here.
Well, I'll tell you the answer is you're correct. There is no answer. Reyes is up against a lefty today. Hanley Ramirez hasn't been playing. This is you're absolutely going to need to punt. I put right now my top choice would be Eduardo Escobar of the Twins, just to go against Colby Lewis. He hasn't been doing anything special, but find the absolute cheapest shortstop you can who's hitting near the top of the order and put him in, because there's nothing else, and it's more important that you can get your Kershaw, your Ramirez, maybe your Cabrera or Encarnacion than it is to spend money on anybody at shortstop today.
That's a very good point, and that's a strategy that we talk a lot about, and in this case, this is here's where we can put it in play, and that is, pick 3 or 4 of the pitchers that you really want to go against. That list would probably start with Lewis of Texas, and see who the shortstop is going up against him, and just find the cheapest one. Minnesota's got a couple of good shortstops that I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason which one they play on a daily basis, but find a cheap one that has a good matchup and go with that guy. Rather than spending a lot of money on a shortstop on a day where it doesn't look like anybody really stands out.
Yeah, for me, it's more important that A, they be cheap, and B, that they be hitting near the top of the lineup. If there's a rotation guy or a platoon guy who's going to cost you, around $5,000, that's hitting second or something, just plug him in. Maybe you don't get anything out of him. Maybe you get a little lucky with him, but more importantly, you can actually build the rest of your lineup how you want.
Well, and you see this a lot on Sundays when a lot of these teams are playing on Saturday nights now. It's the end of the week, and a guy's played 5 or 6 straight games. Now he's coming back on a Sunday afternoon, and the manager says, "Hey, look, take the day off. We'll give the backup a shot." And like you said, maybe this is a guy that has some speed. Maybe it's a guy they plug in the number 2 hole in the lineup. You get a cheap stolen base out of him. All of a sudden, you're looking like a genius.
Yep. Good stuff. Let's move on to the outfield now. I didn't find a ton that I absolutely love in the outfield. Another reason why I think I'll probably go with a couple big first basemen. I think maybe I can save here. Chris Davis for me is one standout. He's hitting 347 with 6 homers in 75 at bats against lefties. You look at De La Rosa, he's given up 10 home runs to righties, and he's actually been worse on the road than he has at Coors Field. We've talked a lot about going after De La Rosa. That's a great play right there. Billy Hamilton has just continued to be hot. Another multi-hit game last night. That's 10 multi-hit games in the month of June. He's got 14 stolen bases in the month of June. Josh Hamilton, he's had a good career, history against Guthrie. He's got 4 home runs and 28 at bats. And then if you look at Guthrie, he's given up the most home runs in the league to left-handed hitters. So that looks really good for Hamilton as well as Cole Calhoun. I think he's a good low-price option. And then I'm not going to talk about low-price options at all without mentioning JD Martinez. He's hit in 16 of his last 17 games. He's hitting 381 against righties. Again, Feldman is a righty who gives up a lot of power to righties. So I think JD Martinez is another very important building block to building your lineup. I may, depending on what I have, use Martinez and Calhoun and then pick from one of the other top-tier options. Dave, what do you think in the outfield?
I'm right with you on those selections. When you mentioned Cabrera, going up against Feldman, I thought, yeah, it's a good, the way Detroit's hitting, you're going to want to get 1 or 2 Detroit hitters in there, and you could argue that Martinez is the best play among all of them, based in part on his price, but also on the fact that he's as hot as anybody in the league right now. And Calhoun is another guy, like you mentioned, who's hitting very well. The Angels should be able to put up some runs in this game. I'm not going to be able to afford Trout, but obviously he's hitting well, and he's a guy that would be at or near the top of my list if I could afford him. But the guy at top my outfield list is actually Stanton, and he's going to be my home run selection of the day. He goes up against Malone of the A's. Malone gives up a lot of homers. Stanton hits a lot of homers against lefties. He's going to be if I'm going to spend money, as I said before, on 2 hitters, it's probably going to be Ramirez and Stanton. And then once I get to that point, I'm going to be looking to save money. So you probably are going to see Martinez and Calhoun. Maybe Inciarte of Arizona, who's now batting leadoff for them, as a very cheap, basically getting him for free kind of guy who can steal some bases, get a hit. He's kind of the Billy Hamilton Jr., at a very cheap price. All it takes basically is 1 hit and 1 steal, and you've got your value for a guy like that. So, my outfield is going to start with Stanton, and then I'm going to be, pinching pennies.
Yeah, that's a very solid play. I always like Stanton when he's at home facing a lefty, especially Malone has not been good on the road. He's given up 6 home runs and 7 starts on the road. So I think that's a very, very solid play right there. All right, that wraps it up. Seems like Dave and I sort of see an eye to eye a lot. We'll go ahead and do the final word. For me, it's Kershaw. You pretty much need to start him. I mean, you can do Kershaw or Hernandez, either one. I would give the edge to Kershaw and then go with a cheaper option. I like Bolsinger. I like just going against San Diego. For me, places to save money, you can save at catcher with a guy like Kurt Suzuki. You can save at shortstop's going to be sort of a punt play today. And then I think you're going to try to get Aramis Ramirez is very important. And then 2 of the first basemen I mentioned, again, Cabrera, Encarnacion, Abreu, Maurer, and Teixeira are all very good plays. I think one of them goes in first base, one of them goes in utility, and that's going to determine what you do in the outfield, whether you spend big on a Stanton or a Chris Davis, Josh Hamilton, something like that. But I think you can use Cole Calhoun and JD Martinez as very effective, inexpensive outfielders. Dave, final word.
Yeah, I agree with you almost all the way. I mean, I think the lineup starts with Kershaw and Ramirez, and in my opinion, Stanton. I'd put those 3 high-priced guys in the lineup, and then then you're not going to get very many other real heavyweights. Maybe none other heavyweights in your lineup. My second pitcher, I like Gallardo. He's a little more expensive than your guy, but I think he's got a really nice matchup. And then I'm saving money at second base with Callaspo or Forsythe. saving money at catcher with Navarro. You mentioned Martinez already in the outfield, and probably Calhoun. And then we'll see where that leaves us at first base and utility. I mean, in the my dream world, I'm going to get Encarnacion and Mauer in the lineup. I probably am dreaming there, so I'm probably going to end up with Mauer and maybe one other mid to low-priced outfielder, a Parra or Inciarte or somebody like one of the Arizona guys. But it's you just got to plug them in and see how the numbers add up and see what's left. And we've mentioned a lot of different options, so hopefully one's in your price range when it comes down to filling that last spot.
All right, that wraps us up. Thank you very much for joining us. Dave and I will be back tomorrow. In the meantime, check out our full rankings at blog.fanmouth.com and follow us on Twitter at PlayFanmouth. Thank you very much.